Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Islamic Calling Podcast. So today I actually wanted to make a video on a topic that has been circulating the internet recently, which is the whole incident of what happened in Pakistan. So in case you guys don't know, recently there was a tragedy that took place in Pakistan. So basically a man was burned alive on accusations of blasphemy. Now I know the usual nonsense that comes with this kind of incidents. Bhaks are very happy about this. They are obviously spreading propaganda. This is another example of blasphemy law and blah blah. So as usual, we got our usual suspects like Apus making defamatory videos against Islam, saying this is happening because of Islam. And of course, the interesting thing is that there's another side to this, which is that this kind of sensitive imams and scholars who are going to the opposite extreme and saying that these Islamic laws like blasphemy laws need to be reformed. Now personally I think both of these positions are problematic. So first I'll take a look at what Apus has to say, and then inshallah I'll take a look at famous scholar Yasir Qadhi, and I'll see what he has to say about this. So let's get started.
Today a man has been lynched, tortured, burned outside in the street, brutally killed by a mob of hundreds of people in Pakistan. The man was a Sri Lankan manager in Pakistan, the general manager of a factory, and apparently word spread among the employees of the factory that he apparently ripped a poster with religious texts off a wall. And this rumor led to him being brutally tortured, burned, and killed. Of course, we are supposed to be careful not to be Islamophobic, not to have prejudices, not to blame things on Islam. Of course, it has nothing to do with Islam. Of course, the guy happens to have allegedly offended Islam, and the mob consisted of Islamists who acted in the name of Islam. He was killed in the name of Islam. People thought he deserved the punishment according to Islamic laws. This keeps happening under Islamic law.
As usual fashion, Ridwan fails to understand basic logic. Here he's committing the strawman argument fallacy. No one is saying that this incident has nothing to do with Islam. Literally no one is saying that. However, just because it has a connection to Islam doesn't necessarily mean that this happened because of Islam, okay? Because there's a difference between correlation versus causation. So basically here Ridwan is committing the questionable cause fallacy. Just because there is a correlation between Islam and what happened in this incident does not mean Islamic law itself caused what happened in this incident, okay? Because correlation doesn't mean causation. As a matter of fact, in this case we can actually prove that Islamic law has nothing to do with this, because it is strictly prohibited under Sharia law to do any kind of mob violence, Islam QA. And this is basically, personally I take this position, which is that blasphemy should be punishable. However, that should be only up to the leader and no one else. There has to be a trial before this actually happens. So basically this is what they said. If the person who defames him is a non-Muslim living under a treaty with the Muslim state, then this is a violation of the treaty and he must be executed, but that should be left to the authorities. So both the Hanafis and the Salafis in this case are actually in agreement. As a matter of fact, there's a hadith which says, it was narrated from Abu Huraira, that the Prophet said, the Muslim is the one from whose tongue and hand the people are safe, and the believer is the one from whom the people's lives and wealths are safe. You can read about this in Sunan An-Nasai 4995. So you can clearly see that Muslims as people cannot hurt anyone. Anyone, it doesn't matter whether it's a Muslim or non-Muslim. We as people cannot hurt anyone. However, if someone has committed a crime and it is proven in court, then the court will decide what punishment to give, right? It's not up to us. So what happened in this factory is absolutely haram. There is no justification for this in Islam. So So, yes, I agree that this has a connection or correlation with Islam, but just because there's a correlation doesn't mean there's a causation. And there's definitely no causation because Islam does not allow this. Okay? So, just because they happen to be Muslims does not mean you can now accuse Islam of like promoting this type of behavior.
He's the conservative religious prime minister of this country in which the blasphemy laws are still being upheld, according to which being critical of Islam and Muhammad and the Muslim community can give you the death sentence. Can you imagine that? Blasphemy laws? I mean, how backward, how uneducated, how underdeveloped, how absolutely ridiculously, pathetically stupid, uncivilized do you have to be to still think that people who engage in blasphemy should be executed?
So, I'm kind of curious, what does civilized look like according to Ridwan? Well, let's read from an article to get an understanding of how civilized the humanist or the liberal world powers are. So there's a New York Times article by Christina Goldbaum, and it says the following. It basically talks about what's happening in Afghanistan. This is an article that came out recently. This is what it says. An estimated 22.8 million people, more than half of the country's population, are expected to face potentially life-threatening food insecurity this winter. Many are already on the brink of catastrophe. Sialkot, Afghanistan, one by one, women poured into the mud brick clinic, the frames of famished children peeking out beneath the folds of their pale grey, blue and pink burqas. Many had walked for more than an hour across this drab stretch of southern Afghanistan, where parched earth meets a washed-out sky. Desperate for medicine to pump back life into their children's shrunken veins. For months, their once daily meals have grown more sparse as harvests failed. Wells ran dry, and credit for flour from shopkeepers ran out. Now, as the crisp air grew colder, reality was settling in. Their children might not survive the winter. I'm very afraid this winter will be worse than we can imagine, said Laltak, a woman who 40, who, like many women in rural Afghanistan, goes by only one name. Nearly 4 months since the Taliban seized power, Afghanistan is on the brink of mass starvation that aid groups say threatens to kill 1 million children this winter. Doesn't that sound familiar? It's very similar to what happened in Iraq. Because they have seized all their money, the economy of Afghanistan has almost collapsed, and it seems like there's going to be a famine, or a lot of people are fearing there might be a famine, and people are starving. And a lot of people are suggesting that millions of children could die as a result of this. So, according to Ridwan, this is civilized, right? When you literally starve millions of children to death, that is civilization. You know, that is civilized. That is modern. But when Muslims want to practice their own laws in their own land, and they don't want their religion to be, insulted, mocked, paraded around like some kind of joke, like it has become in the Western world, like how Christianity has become a joke in the Western world. When they don't want that, then they're called, barbaric, uncivilized, and blah blah, right? Now this begs the question: why is it okay for you, Ridwan, to force us to adopt your laws and your ethical systems, but we can't do the same with our own people? I mean, so it's okay for you to force us to adopt your laws by starving us, but we can do the same for our own people? I mean, we're not even starving anybody. We're just practicing our own laws. So why is it okay for you to force your laws on us, but we can do the same with our own people? Again, this is completely inconsistent. I mean, here Ridwan is committing the fallacy of inconsistency. I mean, again, why is it civilized for, people to starve an entire country, but it's not civilized to punish people when other people mock their religion? This doesn't make any sense. I mean, why on earth would anyone want their religion to be mocked or insulted? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Why does this mentality exist? And I will tell you why. Because it deals directly with me and many of us here. This mentality exists because we have allowed this type of speech and rhetoric to become mainstream. Our leaders and clerics are preaching hatred of other people for years and decades. And when you preach hatred and you keep on enforcing they're this and they're that and you look and they're like this, those years and decades of hate, they become concentrated in the heart. It's literally like you're pouring gasoline for years on a society. Then when somebody else lights the match, you say, oh, I didn't do that. But you did. By teaching your people who are struggling to be good Muslims, struggling to pray 5 times a day, you are prioritizing hating other people. What's going to happen? And this is the reality of the BJP. It is the reality of Zionism. It is the reality of every far right in this country. What do? They keep on indoctrinating their people to hate another group of people. And my understanding of Islam, my understanding of the Seerah, we concentrate on our faults more than the faults of other people. And I am a minor student of knowledge in the grand scale of things. I don't consider myself to be a top-tier Shaykhul Islam. A'udhu billah. I'm a tawailib, as I say, minor student of knowledge. But I have spoken not to a few, dozens, maybe even 100 ulama around the world asking the same question. Ulama double my age, maybe even triple a few years ago my age. Senior ulama. I have spoken to Shaykh Qadhi and others directly, many senior ulama, about this one issue. And I say this just so that you understand this isn't coming from me. I have asked many ulama this question. In the modern world that we live in, is there room for renegotiating the laws of Islam as they apply to the nation state? Can we rethink through what can and cannot be done for the time being? Not a permanent ban, but rethink through the punishments and the ridda laws and the hudud laws. And every single person that I have asked, because I asked those that I consider to be ulama, forward-thinking, open-minded, everyone that I have asked has said the exact same thing, which is that yes, this goes back to pros and cons, masalih and mafasid. And they give me examples from the seerah. The Prophet ﷺ was asked by Umar ibn Khattab, why don't you execute Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul? He's a leader of the munafiqun. He's nothing but trouble. Execute him. We know who he is. The Quran has been revealed about him. Execute him. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? No, I don't want people to misunderstand and say, I'm killing my own companions. He took the PR into account. He understood that there are repercussions globally by doing something that might look good domestically. When he conquered Mecca, he said to Aisha radiallahu anha, I wish I could demolish the Kaaba and reconstruct it on the original structure of Ibrahim, but the Quraysh are new Muslims. They wouldn't understand. They would reject this. They would think I'm destroying the Kaaba. I don't want to do that. So he left it upon that. He understood there's something that you look at the pros and cons in the global world that we live in. When there are large Muslim minorities like us in America and Australia and Canada, and something happening in Pakistan has global impact, can we rethink through in the nation state certain laws? Every alim says yes, because temporarily you can rethink. By the way, the science of applying Islam at a societal level, it is a separate branch of fiqh. It is called siyasa sharia. It is called Islamic political science. The fact of the matter, most minor students of knowledge, they study a book of fiqh and they think this book is the constitution of the country. No, books of fiqh are personal between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't change those just because of a culture and society. Applying fiqh at a communal level, at a societal level, that is a separate branch of Islam. And unfortunately, many people don't study that branch. The top scholars do. That's why they all understand. Sometimes you can temporarily fine-tune. We're not saying abrogate. Nobody has the right to abrogate the sharia. So this notion of blasphemy and of ridda, we have the right in every society, Muslim majority, to say what can and cannot be done. And that is not a rejection of the sharia.
Now, I'm not gonna kind of like lecture you on like in Islamic fiqh and law. You know that a lot better than me, so I'm not gonna like talk about that with you. What I will talk about though is something in regards to giving dawah or dealing with polemics or apologetics, and also to some degree geopolitics. Sheikh, there's something you need to understand, which is that what you're advocating for is extremely problematic and bad, especially because how does changing blasphemy law gonna help anybody? Like, have you not seen what's going on with the Christians? Like, they have literally changed everything. They have opened up their churches to like gay marriages. Like, there are Christian gay priests. The atheists and like people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris all of a sudden went put up their hands like this and were like, hey, you know what? They've changed. We cannot criticize the Christianity anymore. We're gonna become Christians and embrace Jesus. Is that what they're saying, Sheikh? Of course not. I'm kind of being sarcastic, but you understand what I mean. The thing is, we all live in a bubble, right? And this bubble is made up of things that are around us, right? For example, our news media, our channels, etc., etc. So sometimes these things can become an echo chamber where you only hear things that this bubble wants you to hear. And I think in the case of many Western dais, this is the case. Because you guys are only hearing what the Western world wants you to hear. And you guys are actually not hearing our voices. Your media, and especially in the Western world, I imagine you guys are surrounded by what the Western media wants you to hear. So you guys are not hearing our side of things. So when you're constantly hearing this, like, in Pakistan, this happened, blah, blah, blah. I mean, why are they only feeding you this story? Have you ever, questioned that? They're only feeding you this story because they want to cover up their own horrible stuff. I mean, as I just talked about, America right now is forcing complete starvation on the people of Afghanistan. That is way worse, 10 times, million times worse than anything that is happening in Pakistan right now. Okay, just think about that for a second. The Western government doesn't want you to think about that. They don't want you to talk about that. So they're shifting the attention to something else. They're making their media focusing on something else. They're blaming the Muslims. Oh, look at these Muslims. What they're doing. Yes, what's happening is bad. It's not as bad as killing millions of or starving millions of children in Afghanistan. That's way worse. So, and they're getting away with it. And this doesn't help us in any way. Now, let me deal with some of the points you made. Number one, you said that there are preachers that spread hate. Why do you think they do that? They do that is because they're facing hate themselves. I mean, you have no idea how Islamic scholars are treated in sub-Indian continent or Southeast or in South Asia. They're treated horribly. Okay, just a few days ago, a very prominent Islamist in my country were taken to the prison and he was heavily tortured. And the news media tried to make him out to look like the bad guy. And he's like a top Islamic scholar. The secular government hates Islamists and Islamic scholars, especially when they criticize their policies, Islamic rights issues. They hate that and they put them in prison. And on top of that, you have this onslaught of Western liberal garbage that are coming from outside that they have to deal with. So when you're in that position, especially for Islamic scholar, it's extremely difficult to be charitable when they see things like Muslims being lynched for eating meat. As Sheikh, you should try to understand their position. Now the solution that you want to give them, it seems like, is that they should just accept all this abuse. They should accept the fact that Muslims are being lynched and killed and all of this, and they cannot spew any kind of criticism against like these Hindu Bhakts and all these other like garbage political ideologies. They have to accept that and they have to be respectful. Why? Exactly. Why? I mean, how can you be respectful to people who are bullying you, abusing you? That doesn't make any sense. That's not just. That's not up on the haq. Now, the thing is that, yes, you're right to some degree. Yes, sometimes some Islamic scholars do cross the line. But even then, if you want to tackle that, you should advocate for blasphemy law. You shouldn't advocate for like getting rid of it. Because if there's blasphemy law, then you can't just not only put the non-Muslims in check from saying like anti-religious things, you can also put the Muslims in check. Because in Islam, Muslims are also not allowed to, insult other people's religion. So you can put both parties in check. But getting rid of it doesn't help anybody. As a matter of fact, the only thing it helps are people like Ridwan. It's Apus. These murtads. That's who they help. That's who gets the help. And you're comparing examples of like the Prophet and what he did at his time and the Salaf with modern Muslim leaders. Like, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ and the companions did things that are impossible for most Muslims to do now. Okay, they did more than enough. Okay, so if they want to put some kind of exception on some rulings, that is very different than what Muslim leaders can do now. Muslim leaders nowadays don't even do the basics. Okay, you were talking about Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ fought armies after armies for the deen, right? Like he rolled up on different lands, foreign lands, and destroyed their idols. Like Umar ibn Khattab, he went in different lands and destroyed their idols. Muawiyah, he's like destroyed one of the biggest idol that existed. I think like it was like the statue of Helios. He did that. Do you honestly think any Muslim leaders that exist now will to do something like that? And you're comparing them to these people? Check, with all respect, the leadership in our country are cowards. They're cowards. You can't compare them. They don't even know how to do the basics. I mean, even people like Imran Khan are sending Uyghurs back to China. That's the reality. That's where we are. And you're telling us that on top of that, we should give them more ground. So basically, you're telling us we should just give up everything and get nothing in return. Oh yeah, the Colossus of Rhodes. So in case you guys don't know, the Colossus of Rhodes was a massive bronze statue. It was a statue of Greek sun called Helios. It existed in the city of Rhodes on Greece. And this statue was at one point, I think, like there was like an earthquake and it broke down. And then at 653, the Arab force under Muslim General Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu, they captured Rhodes. And according to Chronicles of Theophanes, the confessor, the statue was melted down and sold to a Jewish merchant of Edessa, who loaded the bronze onto 900 camels. You can read about this in the Chronicles of Theophanes, Confessor, Byzantine, and Near Eastern history. So, the reason I am talking about this, just think about what just happened. The zeal that Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu and his army had. They literally rolled up to Greece and took one of the 7 wonders and melted down and then sold it. Do you understand how big of a deal that is? How much bravery and badassery it takes to do something like that? These are the people you're talking about. And you're comparing them with the leaders we have now? But thank you guys for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. And if you guys like my content and if you guys want to support me, then please consider support me on Patreon. The links are around here and in the description, obviously. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Jazakallah khair. By the way, if Yasir Qadhi is watching, by the way, Sheikh, I didn't mean any disrespect, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. But regardless, with this, I want to end this video. Thank you guys for watching. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.